All right. Hopefully you guys are nice and awake. Good evening, everyone. I'm from the West Coast live here. Laurie Ledley. I'm the founder and president of Valley Sleep Center. Haven't been on live for a while, so thank you for giving me a little pause. I'm super excited tonight to introduce to you Caroline Arnette. She's coming all the way from the East Coast, where it's 3 hours ahead, 8:30 in the evening. And Caroline is really unique. She has struggled with her own health issues. She has been diagnosed with narcolepsy and cataplexy. She is a college honors student and is learning about political advocacy, and she is going to navigate us through her journey and how she's become her own advocate and how we can become our advocate. And we want to learn more about narcolepsy, because I know as a sleep technologist, narcolepsy is very rare and very misunderstood. And so thank you, Caroline, for being with us tonight. And we want to welcome everyone on the webinar. If you're live on Facebook, I'm sorry you're not going to be in the drawing, but maybe you can participate next time. We are going to draw an Apple Watch to one lucky attendee. So yes, I see you on the webinar, and you are going to be entered. You need to be present at the end. I'll announce the winner when Caroline's done with her presentation, and I'll email you with the details of how to get your Apple Watch. I thought an Apple Watch would be a really creative way, because it's important that we kind of track our sleep-wake cycles and things like that when we're struggling with sleep disorders. So that's what we're going to be doing. So if you have any questions, feel free to chat them in the chat or on the Q&A down at the bottom of your screen. And as soon as I draw the Apple Watch winner, we will answer questions and answer questions, get to the questions and answers. All right. Thank you, Caroline.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited. So my name is Caroline Arnette. I'm 18 years old, and I'm currently a freshman at American University in Washington, D.C. Although due to the pandemic, I am currently doing it online from my home. So first, I'd like to tell a little bit about myself. I was diagnosed with type 1 narcolepsy, which is narcolepsy with cataplexy, at the age of 14. There are two types of narcolepsy. There is type 1, my type, and then type 2, which is narcolepsy without cataplexy. As I mentioned, I am a freshman at American University, and I am a public health and biology major, and my goal is to become a rare disease researcher at the National Institutes of Health. I am the lead youth ambassador for Narcolepsy Network, which is a nonprofit that advocates for narcolepsy. So if you want to learn more about narcolepsy or the Narcolepsy Network, feel free to contact me at my email, which is caroline@narcolepsynetwork.org. Also, if you or someone you know are 14 to 22 years old and have a narcolepsy diagnosis, you are a perfect fit for the Youth Ambassador program. So just felt like I should put a little plug in there. If you know anyone, you should absolutely let them know. So what is narcolepsy? Narcolepsy is a neurological sleep disorder, and it's classified as a rare disease. And a rare disease is less than 200,000 people in the United States have a diagnosis with a disease. So narcolepsy is a lifelong condition, meaning that there is no cure, and it is characterized with 5 major symptoms. The first and most common is excessive daytime sleepiness, also known as EDS. This is the inability to stay awake. So my neurologist, who is a pediatrician who specializes in sleep disorders, would describe it as, you're not just tired, you're actually sleepy. It's the inability to stay awake regardless of effort. So it is crushing exhaustion that you can't fight through. And then there's cataplexy, which you do not have to have narcolepsy, but the majority of narcolepsy cases do have cataplexy, myself included. Cataplexy is the sudden muscle weakness or muscle paralysis triggered by strong emotions. It can be very subtle or very severe. So for example, if someone makes me laugh, I can feel the muscles in my face start to droop because they're getting weaker. So that's extremely subtle, and I only feel it. But there are also scenarios like, for example, my brother will scare me by jumping around a corner, and it will shock me. So I will collapse to the ground because my legs were paralyzed. So that is very noticeable and very severe. So lots of people who have narcolepsy don't realize they have cataplexy because it can be so hard to notice. And if you don't know what you're looking for, you might not even know you have it. The next major symptom is disrupted nighttime sleep. The common image of someone with narcolepsy is the person who falls asleep in their bowl of soup, or the person who falls asleep standing up. And the reason that image is what people think of is because of disrupted nighttime sleep. The brain is unable to regulate sleep cycles, so my brain, without medication, never falls asleep in the right way at the right times. So even if I am sleeping, I'm not getting good sleep. So for example, before I was diagnosed or treated, I could fall asleep and sleep for 12 hours. And when I would wake up, I would feel even more tired than when I had gone to bed. Because although I was physically going through the motions of sleeping, my brain wasn't sleeping properly, so it didn't really matter. The next symptom is sleep paralysis, which is the inability to move right before falling asleep or right before waking up. And this is caused because your sleep cycle is so shattered that sometimes when you're falling asleep or waking up, your brain still thinks you're asleep, so your body can't move. The next are hypnagogic and hypnopompic hallucinations, and these are lifelike hallucinations that often occur in tandem with sleep paralysis. So it's kind of like literally dreaming while you're awake. You see things because your brain thinks you're dreaming, so you see dreamlike, lifelike hallucinations. So these are pictures of me asleep before I was diagnosed. As I mentioned, I was diagnosed at 14, and basically every picture on my mother's cell phone of me up until my diagnosis was me asleep, because that's basically all I ever did. I was at my worst symptomatically when I was in 8th grade, and I would go home from school, sit on the couch planning to just unwind, and I would fall asleep for 4 hours. And then I would wake up, eat dinner, and then go to bed and sleep for 10 hours, 12 hours. And every time I woke up, I felt even more tired. So it was this vicious cycle of constantly sleeping and constantly needing sleep. And I would fall asleep when I got home, so I couldn't do any of my homework, and I would fall asleep in class, so I would miss content that I then didn't learn through my homework. So my narcolepsy, when it was untreated, absolutely impacted my academics and my social life because I was too tired to have an active social life. And as everyone knows, when you're really tired, you're also really grumpy. So I was not necessarily the most pleasant individual to be around because my exhaustion made me not the person I actually am, which is a relatively positive and sunny person. So I was diagnosed when I was a freshman in high school. My mom realized that my exhaustion was more than just a teenager being sleepy. There was something deeper at play, and there was something wrong, but she didn't know what. So she talked to my pediatrician, and my pediatrician referred me for a sleep study at the hospital in my area. And my neurologist said, you have all the signs of narcolepsy, but we need to do diagnostic tests. So I did the MSLT and the PSG, which are the multi-sleep latency test, and the polysomnogram, which are 2 different sleep tests that basically monitor your brain activity to see if it reflects narcoleptic brain activity during sleep. So once I was diagnosed, a huge weight was lifted from me because I had 2 great fears. My first great fear was that the doctor would tell me that I had something terminally wrong with me because at that point I had been going on 14 years of sleep deprivation and I wasn't necessarily thinking too rationally. So I was like, oh my gosh, I have a brain tumor, I'm dying. And then my second greatest fear was that the doctor would tell me there was nothing wrong with me and this was just my life. And that was honestly even scarier to me because I was so tired and so angry and so frustrated and so confused because I didn't know what was happening. So I was honestly relieved when the doctor told me that there was something wrong with me and it wasn't going to kill me, which isn't necessarily the most conventional response, but I was just relieved that there was something I could do. So after I was diagnosed, I was placed on a bunch of medications, and it took like a year for me to balance out the different medications that help me stay awake during the day and fall asleep at night. And I have medications that actually make me feel better when I'm sleeping, which is life-changing because I would actually sleep for 8 hours and wake up and felt like I had slept for 8 hours. So I realized after going on support groups and message boards that my recovery and my success was very unusual. And that made me really sad because I was miserable and so tired and so ill when I was untreated. And once I was treated, my academics went right back to where they used to be. I had lots of friends. I was doing sports and school plays, and I was just doing so well. And I thought, it's so sad that my story is an exception, not the expectation. So that's when I tried to start getting into advocacy. First, I went to all of my teachers and I explained to them what narcolepsy is, so hopefully they could recognize it in other students and also know how to help me be a successful student. And then I gathered all the nurses, school nurses in my county, and I presented to them, basically saying all of the symptoms that I've had. And for example, I used to pretend I had migraines, so I would go to the nurse and sleep in her office with the lights off because migraines make people sensitive to light. So I basically told them all of like my tricks for coping with being sleepy so they could recognize it in other students. After that is when I tried to take my advocacy to the next level. I applied for Narcolepsy Network's Youth Ambassador program, and I was accepted and attended the training at their annual conference. After that, I was given the tools and the knowledge to try to take things to a bigger scale. So this is me and other representatives from Narcolepsy Network at Washington, D.C. And I'm fortunate enough to live in Virginia, so I'm only a few hours away from the Capitol. So don't feel like you can only be an advocate if you travel across the nation to Washington, D.C. But this was an event called Rare Disease Week on Capitol Hill. So Rare Disease Week is a week of advocates coming to speak to their senators and congresspeople about their rare disease. So I spoke to all of my elected officials about narcolepsy and my story and why it's so important to support research and funding and everything that helps people with rare diseases like narcolepsy be successful. There are also other kinds of advocacy you can do that are much smaller. Again, you can do things like telling your employer or telling your teacher or telling your doctor. My pediatrician, who is not my neurologist, admitted that she did not know very much about narcolepsy. So I basically gave her a bunch of educational material on what narcolepsy is so she could be better equipped to recognize it and refer people to neurologists in the future. Because of all of my work, both on Capitol Hill and with Narcolepsy Network, I was promoted to the Youth Advisory Board, so I'm the lead youth ambassador at Narcolepsy Network. I have been recognized at national conferences. The CEC is the Council for Exceptional Children, which is basically a group of special education, gifted education, and other forms of non-mainstream education teachers. And every year they select individuals who've demonstrated achievement in their field. And last February, I was awarded for my advocacy work, which was an enormous honor. But it just goes to show that you never know where your advocacy can take you. At first, I thought it was just me trying to help other kids be as successful as I was. But I've really turned it into my career and my life. I'm attending college in DC so that I can get an education to become an advocate and a researcher. And I could not have done any of this without that first inspiration. So if you have any questions about any level of advocacy or narcolepsy, feel free. Thank you so much.
Great. All right. So go ahead and start to put your questions in the chat or the Q&A, and we will get to those. Caroline, would you tell me how you ended up at the sleep neurologist. Like who referred you there? Was it your pediatrician? And I'm sorry if I missed that.
You're good. So it's somewhat of a complicated story. So my mother has a friend whose daughter was going through sleep problems, and they were recently talking about it at the time, and that girl had had a sleep study. So when my mom heard those words, it just like clicked in her head, and she was like, maybe Caroline should have one of those. So when I went to the pediatrician for like some routine thing, like I had a cold, my mom mentioned it to the pediatrician, and the pediatrician was like, oh yeah, no, you should absolutely have the sleep study. And she referred me to my neurologist, and that's how I got diagnosed.
Awesome. So what about what was your original goal in your advocacy? Like, was it just getting awareness out there about narcolepsy, or did you go to Capitol Hill with a specific goal in mind? Would you share that?
When I started my advocacy, my general goal was just to increase awareness, because the average time it takes for someone with narcolepsy to be diagnosed is 7 years, and that is unacceptable. Like, I'm incredibly lucky. It only took me a few months to get diagnosed once I started actively looking. And I can say with relative certainty that my life would have been completely derailed and potentially ended, if I can be frank, if I had to do 7 more years of bone-crushing exhaustion and misery like that.
Yeah.
So for me, it was definitely about raising awareness for diagnosis. But as my advocacy career developed for things like Capitol Hill, I have more specific asks. Like, for example, the National Institutes of Health is a conglomeration of different like health studies. So for example, the National Cancer Institute. So one of the legislative asks that I talked about was having a National Rare Disease Institute, so you can focus on rare diseases. So it is more general and more specific contextually.
Right. Thanks for sharing. I'm going to draw the name and then we'll get to the questions. All right. The winner of the Apple Watch, and I will email you with details. Oh, this is so hard. It's my little hat. Pick one. All right. Barbara D, you are the winner of the Apple Watch, so I will email you. Okay, congratulations. That's exciting. All right, so what medicines do you take for improvement, and what medicines do you take to get to sleep? Yes. Or do you take medicines to get to sleep?
I'm just going to preface this by saying, obviously, I'm not a medical professional, but in my experience from my doctor's recommendation, I take Zyrem to go to sleep at night. And again, in my personal experience, it has definitely been life-changing, and it is the only medication I've ever taken that has made me feel like I sleep properly and wake up feeling better. During the day, I take Ritalin to stay awake, and my cataplexy was incredibly severe, like unusually severe. My neurologist said it was one of the worst cases he's ever seen. So I take Zoloft, which is an SSRI, as a cataplexy suppressant.
All right. And Tatiana says, I'm 48, narcolepsy diagnosis at 21 with cataplexy. I also have hyperhearing and tinnitus. I cannot take Zyrem any longer. That was the best pharmaceutical for me, but now I feel hopeless. What are options for medication for sleep? Okay, Tatiana, I don't know if you're a patient at Valley Sleep Center, but any of our providers could go over that question for you. I don't prescribe medicine. I am a sleep expert, but I probably can't comment on that. I would leave it up to the physicians or the nurse practitioners who specialize in sleep. AJ, hi AJ. I'm in my 60s. I had an embarrassing moment falling asleep at work with high-level negotiations. When I laugh wholeheartedly, my legs become weak, so I believe I qualify for narcolepsy type 1. What medication can help me? AJ, what you would need is an overnight sleep study that we would rule out. She talked about that polysomnogram that she had done in the MSLT. So what we do at the sleep center is we study you all night to rule out any other sleep disorder, because there's lots of other sleep disorders that could cause different types of excessive daytime sleepiness and events that you might have during the day. If we don't see any other sleep disorders on your sleep study, we would keep you all day during the day and we would do what we call a multiple sleep latency test, MSLT, and we do naps every 2 hours, and then we evaluate your diagnosis of hypersomnia, narcolepsy. The doctors would need to diagnose you, a board certified sleep doctor, based on what we see and levels of in those naps, whether you go into REM quickly and that kind of thing. So that's how we diagnose that.
If I may, can I comment on something? So firstly, to Tatiana, never give up hope, because there are all sorts of different pharmaceuticals that are being approved as we speak by the FDA. So something, even if there aren't any medications out there that haven't helped you yet, there could be one coming. So I would never give up hope. And for AJ, of course, you need to go through all of the tests. Absolutely, you do. But if you do have weakness in your legs, I feel like it is likely that you do have cataplexy. And again, that is not a diagnosis, because I am an 18-year-old who does not have an MD. But for cataplexy, I take Zoloft, and there are other different medications you can take, like Effexor, for cataplexy, if you get a diagnosis, of course.
Correct. Awesome. So what do you do, Caroline, as the lead youth ambassador for Narcolepsy Network? Could you share that with us?
So for the lead youth ambassador, every year, except this year because of coronavirus, unfortunately, we do train a new group of youth ambassadors. So the Youth Ambassador Program is a group of people with narcolepsy ages 14 to 22 that are trained to become advocates for narcolepsy awareness. So I lead the trainings every year, which I have for the last 2 years, and I also keep track of their progress. Like, for example, one of my Youth Ambassador YA friends just gave an online presentation to all of the teachers at his school. So I basically keep track of all of that, and I also can assign things for people to do. We have lots of webinars that Narcolepsy Network puts on, so I speak at a lot of those, and I organize other YA activities.
So once you're diagnosed with narcolepsy, is there something to help overcome the disease other than medication?
So, of course, medication has been the most helpful thing in my experience, but there are lots of lifestyle changes that are good for any person to do, but people can also try to do to manage narcolepsy. I know lots of people that have tried cutting out glue like that, and I didn't necessarily find a difference, but I know people who have sworn up and down that it helps. Of course, having a healthy diet is good for everyone, but having a healthy diet is especially good for people with underlying chronic conditions, and sleep hygiene is super important. I personally cannot fall asleep and get a good night's sleep in a room that's too warm. So I try to make sure that before I get ready for bed, the thermostat's at a good temperature for me. I try to not stay up on my phone too much. Just general common sense sleep hygiene can be helpful, especially if your narcolepsy doesn't seem to be too debilitating.
And then how did you manage your triggers for microsleep episodes? For example, eating heavy meals will often trigger microsleep for me. This is from Wisdom.
So I take daytime stimulants that help me sleeps, but I also just try to avoid situations that tend to cause them worse. Like, for example, my friends will ask me, before COVID, of course, to hang out at the movie theater. And I'm like, I'm basically going to be paying $8 for a nap. So I'll be I'll meet up with you and get ice cream after or something like that. But I just try to avoid places where I know it'll happen particularly badly. And if it's something I can't avoid, for example, lots of people talk about falling asleep on public transportation. You can try to, I know someone who plays music really loud. That's not necessarily good for your ears, but it keeps them awake. So if that's what you need to do, that's what you need to do. So I feel a lot of it is being prepared for situations that you can't avoid and avoiding situations that you reasonably can.
So Paige says, what was your experience like in the year that you were looking for medications that work for you? I'm going through this now, and it seems as though my doctor and sleep specialists are leaving what to try in my hands, and I need more direction.
So when I was going through this, I was 14. So this was largely out of my hands. Like, of course, I had say in everything, but I was a very sick, very sleep deprived young teenager. So a lot of it was like my mother conducting research. And also I have a very good relationship with my neurologist. Unfortunately, I know people where that is not the case, but everything my doctor recommended worked very well for me. And he also had a very good outlook. His outlook was, you can take a medication and it can make you feel good, but is there something that can make you feel better? So for example, I took a smaller dose of Ritalin than I do now. And he said, this might be the right dose for you, but do you think you could have something different that can make you feel better? So I tried taking 2 different doses so that my afternoons I'm less sleepy. So I feel like a good thing is understanding the difference between improvement and like optimal improvement.
Yeah.
So definitely consider your options and don't settle. Fight for yourself because you're worth it.
I like it. So how long have you taken Zyrem, and has your dose had to increase over time?
So your dose has to increase over time. I started taking Zyrem when I was 15. Yes, I started taking Zyrem the August before my sophomore year in high school, so I would have been 15. So I've been taking it for several years now, and it's working really well for me. You have to titrate up with Zyrem. If your doctor starts you at a dose higher than 2.25, that's like not safe. Like you actually can't do that. Like in the instructions and the videos that you have to watch before you get prescribed it, you start at 2.25 or even lower potentially. So you have to titrate up. I am taking the maximum dose, which is 4.5 grams twice a night, and that works for me very well, but I know people who take much smaller doses and have never gone up because if it goes up for them, it's just diminishing returns. I also know some people who, for example, struggle to get up for school or work in the morning, so they take a larger first dose and a smaller second dose so they don't have brain fog and that they can drive safely. So a lot of it is just safely and slowly tinkering with your dosages at the recommendation of your doctor. Of course, don't take it into your own hands. Please don't.
Yeah, please don't. So you mentioned the brain fog. So could you share with us some of the other common side effects you experienced when you first started taking medication?
So common side effects that I experienced in Zyrem were nausea for the first month or so. Whenever I took Zyrem in the morning, I felt really queasy and I couldn't eat anything. So that was something I experienced for a while. And then I guess my body acclimated to it because I haven't felt Zyrem nausea for years. Another common side effect that I feel is if I wake up in the morning, I always try to give myself a good hour before class because I feel very out of it, kind of catatonic almost, just very brain foggy. So when I was driving to school, when I was in high school, I had to have it out of my system because I can safely drive. My cataplexy and my excessive daytime sleepiness are managed so that I can drive. But I just had to ensure that it was out of my system. And if I still felt it in my system a little, I didn't drive that day. So a lot of it is careful timing, knowing your schedule, and knowing how it affects you before you build your schedule around it.
All right, great feedback. So I think this question's for me. Do we work with children who have narcolepsy? And yes, we do. So Dr. Michael Mohan and Dr. Maria Martinez are both our pediatric board certified sleep specialists who are very knowledgeable in all pediatric sleep disorders. And we do have, of course, adults that get diagnosed with this as well. Sadly, like Carolyn shared, people struggle with this as children and they don't get it diagnosed till they're adults. So it is a big thing. And I want to know from you, Caroline, what can I do as a clinical sleep educator in my community to help get the word out? You know, like you did, you went to teachers and said, these are the things that I used to do so that I could go to the nurse and sleep. Like I would fake a migraine so that I could go in a dark room and sleep because you were so tired. I think that, is it teachers? I know now that kids are home more, parents are noticing, but back before the pandemic, you really had to go to teachers because teachers are with the kids more than the parents are.
Yeah.
Right?
I definitely Yes, I definitely tried to very strategically think about that. I gave a presentation to all of the nurse practitioners and pediatricians in my general pediatrician's office so that they could recognize signs of sleep disorders, specifically narcolepsy, but I did also talk about other sleep disorders.
And
I went to school nurses and I went to teachers, and it was a combination of me explaining my behavior. So like I had a lot of teachers in middle school think that I was very disrespectful because I would fall asleep in their classes, but I knew it wasn't that. And it was reasonable for them to assume that at the time. But I basically went to all of my freshman teachers and was like, this is what's happening. It's not because I don't care. And another part of it was helping recognize it in other students. So
yeah,
I feel like it's definitely important to try to inform points of contact. So for example, if it's applied more for like an adult situation, you can talk to like HR, because if someone is constantly getting HR complaints filed for them for being late or falling asleep at their desk, that is likely or possibly at least a sleep disorder, narcolepsy or not.
right, exactly. Yeah, if you're falling asleep during the day excessively, there's probably something wrong. Um, do you personally support or work with children that have narcolepsy? And if you do, could you share with us how that works?
All the time. So Narcolepsy Network has a Connect program, which is for children ages 8 to 13. So since narcolepsy is a rare disease, lots of people never meet someone else in person who has their disease. So there's something incredibly cathartic and helpful about meeting people who understand what it's like. Like if I talk to my friends about it, they're supportive, but they don't understand. But like if I talk to my narcolepsy friends, I'll be like, I'm really tired. And they'll be like, I'm really tired. And like it's a mutual understanding. So the Connect program, which I got off on a slight tangent, sorry. So the Connect program is for children ages 8 to 13 to connect with each other via Zoom, monitored by people who work with for Narcolepsy Network, to talk about their experiences and advice for growing up with a sleep disorder. And the Youth Ambassador Program is also comprised of teenagers and young adults who have narcolepsy, and through all different stages of diagnosis. We have someone who just did a Youth Ambassador webinar workshop who was diagnosed a couple weeks ago, and we have someone who was diagnosed at age 5 and is 17 now. So we have people with all different stages of experience, so we can learn from each other. I learned about college accommodations from my older friends, and I'm teaching my friend who's 14 about looking at colleges and with narcolepsy. So it's definitely incredibly important to find that peer network.
That's great. Have you or Narcolepsy Network created any documents that you could share, that we could share with teachers or people in our community? And if so, how do we get that information?
So Narcolepsy Network has a wealth of informational resources. So Narcolepsy Network is a membership organization. So there are materials and resources that are available to non-members. But I'm unsure if their educational material is available to the open public, but if it is, you absolutely can do it. And if not, I guess you just have to join Narcolepsy Network. So it's a win-win either way.
How do we join Narcolepsy Network? Like I know that I just recently followed it on Instagram, Facebook. We can sign up for your newsletter, right? On the website?
Yes, so Narcolepsy Network has a website, which I will drop the URL in the chat.
Okay.
And they have different tabs on their website with different resources, including member doctors in the area. So for example, I know someone who just moved from Texas to Oklahoma and they can't find a pediatric neurologist that they like. So they're working with Narcolepsy Network to find a doctor in the area that can work with them better than their current doctor who they don't like too much. So it has a lot of resources for patients and advocates. Yeah.
There's a little bit, I want to just share that if you are struggling with any type of excessive daytime sleepiness, you can come straight to Valley Sleep Center for a consult. You don't need a referral. Most insurances, I mean, unless you have access, which is our Medicaid program, and we'll even get the referral for you. So you can come straight to us. That's all we do is specialize in sleep. And we do a full clinic at all 6 of our locations all day, every day. We do telehealth right now. You do have to have an in the lab sleep study though to be able to diagnose something like narcolepsy.
I have a couple questions in the chat
Yes,
that I can answer. So one is it common for patients with Narcolepsy Network, with narcolepsy to have a therapy dog? So I do know of people who have service dogs. Therapy dogs and service dogs are different. I do know some people who have them, and when my cataplexy was uncontrolled, I did apply for one, but it was a lengthy process, and by the time my application was up for review, medication had managed my symptoms, so I thankfully no longer needed one. But the Canine Partners for Life program does train service dogs for people with narcolepsy. They were the program I used, if you want to look into that. I cannot comment about service cats because I don't know anything about that one way or another. Before Zyrem, was it unsafe for me to drive? Do I live alone or with roommates? So I live at home with my family right now because of college being remote. So I was going to have a roommate, and our deal was basically that I have a safe in my room that I keep my medication in so that I know it's safe. And I could drive. No, I couldn't drive before Zyrem, both because I was not old enough to drive, and even if I was, my symptoms were too bad. My cataplexy was so severe that I actually used like arm braces, arm canes, because I would fall so many times. Like I could fall multiple times an hour, multiple times a minute, depending on what was happening. So thankfully, I am fully autonomous again, and I can move freely, and I can feel emotion, and I'm good. But there was definitely a point in my life where driving was certainly unsafe and definitely not possible.
Well, thank you so much. I want to let you go. I know it's after 9 o'clock there. I really appreciate you. I appreciate Narcolepsy Network for helping me find you, Caroline. I wish you all the success, and I hope that, we see you in the future, and, with maybe someday I can meet you at one of the sleep conferences if we ever get to do that again.
It's too bad. Our annual conference last year was in Albuquerque, New Mexico. That shouldn't be too far.
Next door, yeah. So we are going to hear from your friend Brandon in November. So for those of you who have a heart for narcolepsy, please join us. Watch. You can text the word sleep to 474747, and that'll give you an update to our next community health talks. But thank you,
Brandon
everyone.
is fantastic. Please show up.
Brandon, yeah. All right, everybody. Have a wonderful evening. Thank you again so much, Caroline. We wish you all the best in your college and your success.
Thank you so much.
All right, bye.